Welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 2 of Chainsaw Man. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. Now, last we left off, Denji has sort of gotten himself into a bit of a pickle. He's in essence traded one master for another. Despite getting rid of all of his debt to the Yakuza, namely by slaughtering them all, he's sort of now indentured to Makima and, the Public Safety Commission, who are essentially devil hunters. So the idea is, given that he's no longer entirely human, he either works for them as a human or he dies like a devil. So he wasn't given much leeway in the matter, and given how Makima's sort of talking to him about how, I don't need a dog who doesn't follow orders. It really doesn't seem like this is a much better option for him. I mean, presumably he's not going to be starving and on the verge of being destitute, but he's certainly no more free than he was before. I mean, at the very least, Makima's sort of sweetening the deal up front, saying, hey, what do you want for dinner? I'll be paying. I'd imagine to Denji that that's probably the nicest thing anyone has done for him in recent memory. And, he's even sort of confirming it himself. Lately everybody's been avoiding him because he smells and he's dirty and he's basically homeless, but, somebody's finally being nice to him. So it's kind of nice that Makima, at the very least, is letting him order whatever he wants. He's probably in a position where he's definitely approaching, malnourishment. I feel like this is going to result in something where, you eat too much food, and since you're not used to eating, you'll just sort of puke it all up, or get sick otherwise. I have to say, I really don't like all the CG in Chainsaw Man. But at the same time, as far as CG goes, it is far from the worst looking CG I've ever seen. It's still noticeable. But I feel like if all CG looked like it does here, I feel like people probably wouldn't hate it quite so much. I mean, there hasn't been anything in this episode so far that's been particularly egregious. Man, so Denji's really just sort of living the life here. You know, he gets all woozy and gets to collapse on a cute girl and all that, you know, head in her lap. Like, considering all that he's been through, this is certainly much better. You know, I feel like this is almost a little too tactful of Denji to be like, oh, you know, I can't feed myself, I need help. You know, mommy, feed me noodles, please. Like, that's one of the things I don't really like about Denji too much. Like, he's, a little too eager. But at the same time, you know, Makima's really essentially just egging him on here. It's like, you know, what type of guy do you like? Oh, you know, the Denji type, you know. This sort of type of person that is including and limited to only you. You know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Now, I might be slightly mistaken, but based on my reading of the manga, I do believe there is a little thing that got skipped. So if I remember correctly, Denji had bought the udon, or was given the udon rather, but before he could eat it, there was a little incident with the devil, and Makima said, you know, you can eat after you kill the devil, basically. And it was sort of like, I don't know, I guess it was showcasing how she was both being nice and sort of motherly to Denji, you know, taking care of him, watching out for him, but at the same time that there were definite expectations like, you know, hey, you're here to work, and that work is killing devils, so hop to it, bud. I feel like, you know, if I'm right here and that got sort of skipped, I feel like this is sort of maybe working towards making Makima more initially sympathetic. You know, not that she was unsympathetic originally, but it was something that made me stop and think for a minute, because it's like, you know, yeah, like, Denji's kind of his own person, but at the same time, he is only alive so long as he's cooperating with the Public Safety Committee. So, unfortunately, you know, Denji, he was flying pretty high, but he's sort of come crashing back down to Earth when it becomes clear that Makima is not going to be, I guess, a regular feature of his day-to-day working life. You know, he has to work with some other dude who's carrying around a katana. And, you know, that's got to be a pretty serious downgrade, all things considered. I can't help but feel that Makima is really trying to layer it on thick here by tying his tie for him. Like, it's not like that's a particularly erotic thing or anything like that, but it always puts me in mind of a married couple, at least stereotypically. Like, you'd see that from time to time, like a wife tying her husband's tie. I don't know, it's just like a little thing that puts me in mind of sort of like a person caring for another person. Like, it's a little thing, objectively. So I feel like Denji's friend here, he's kind of barking up the wrong tree. Because on the one hand, he's trying to do something nice. You know, devil hunting is a rough business, get out while you can. But at the same time, I feel like this little beating is rather paltry in comparison to what Denji has suffered through up till this point. And he seems to be of the idea that Denji has insufficient motivation to be a proper devil hunter. You know, he's only in this essentially because he thinks Makima is cute. And, you know, if you want to kill devils that are presumably, like, little monsters ranging up to really, really big scary monsters, then you have to be pretty darn sure that you want to fight them. Unfortunately, Denji is nothing if not reasonably sure of himself. Perhaps he doesn't always have the right idea, but he knows what he wants, and what he wants is to work with Makima, so, if that warrants kicking a guy in the crotch a couple times, so be it. Now, this is one of the things I like about Denji. There's just this sort of crassness about him. Because, normally if you're going to fight with somebody, like, hitting below the belt, that's generally seen as dishonorable. I mean, honor's not going to do you much in a street fight. But at the same time, Denji doesn't hesitate to do it even a little bit. So I guess that's sort of the difference between these two. Denji has no compunction about taking cheap shots, and in fact, that's all he does, whereas the other guy is more willing to sort of fight fair, for want of a better term, and sort of stick to the face. I mean, to his credit, he took like 4 or 5 shots before he finally went down. That's gotta be immensely painful. Now, I don't believe this has been described yet, but devils, as they exist, are sort of manifestations of humanity's collective fear of certain concepts. So Denji's lie there about the nut devil implies that there is a devil that is the collective manifestation of humanity's fear of testicles. And I'd have to say, that would probably be either a really small devil or a pretty big devil, because, fear of testicles themselves, there's not much there, but being injured, that's another story. That would be a rather potent devil, I'd imagine. So I do find it telling that Makima sort of hadn't filled everyone in on Denji's special designation. The idea is he can't quit because he'll be killed. And she really just spells it out. Denji's going to be working with us until he dies. And the idea here is that they're thinking in all likelihood he will die sooner or later. That's not a bad assumption, but I don't know. Something about the way they say that kind of rubs me the wrong way, because on the one hand, that's the business. Hunting devils, death is part of the equation, but on the other hand, you shouldn't be telling the new recruits, like, hey, we expect you to die, we'll attend your funeral. So it seems like finally, Aki and Denji, I don't believe he's been introduced actually, but the two of them, they finally have some common ground. Makima has done something to help both of them. And as a result, maybe they can bury the hatchet a little bit. So this is something else I like about Denji. He's just absolutely a disgusting human being. He's basically just taking advantage of all the amenities he never got to have, and I don't know, he's really just almost like a child. Everything is so abundant and delightful that, he just has to use it, and he doesn't know the proper social rules, like not using up the toilet paper and not replacing it. So it seems like we are about to be apprised of a distinction here, because we are told that there's a fiend. There's devils and there's fiends, and there's, gradations between the two of them. a devil being presumably the raw monster itself, whereas a fiend is a devil inhabiting a human corpse. And, I mean, I don't think we ever really know why precisely a devil would decide to do such a thing, other than presumably to be slightly more inconspicuous. You know, presumably if it's slightly more human-shaped, it won't arouse suspicion and they can sort of do whatever they want unabated. But, you know, that's something that's not really outlined too much, you know, what precisely devils want. I guess it's not important, really, but, you know, we do learn a little bit more about devils and their deal, but never really why they come to Earth and do stuff. Like, presumably wanting to kill and slaughter is just in their nature. So it's interesting that Denji has decided to be sympathetic to the Fiend. You know, the idea being he could have ended up like that guy, so he wants to make the death painless, and just swiftly decapitating him is probably a lot nicer than eviscerating him with the chainsaw. But given that these devils and fiends are all essentially monsters to a man, you know, they slaughter and commit all sorts of crimes, like, you know, Denji's sympathy is probably misplaced. But at the same time, knowing Denji, given how crass he is, you know, sympathy's not the only reason, or perhaps it isn't a reason at all. You know, I feel like this is sort of like a watershed moment for Denji. He didn't want to sprout all the chainsaws because that would get blood all over the place, and it would essentially deface those knockoff Playboy magazines, you know. He's taking that promise seriously. He wants to live a good life for Pochita, and part of that means getting his hands on some magazines, preferably without blood. What a guy. So Denji's sort of hitting on a weird contemplative note, because on the one hand, you know, all these other people he sees, they have big goals in life, or something like that, and he really doesn't. And so because of that, you know, his life is sort of hollow by comparison. He needs something, or considering his line of thought, two somethings to sort of center his life on. And, you know, it might be a misguided pursuit. In fact, it probably is, but everybody has to start somewhere, I guess. Now, the worst part is that he's sort of, just sort of zoning off in a briefing. Ah, boy, here's what I've been waiting for. It's about time for the best character to make her entrance. So it seems like because Denji also has devil powers, he's being paired up with a fiend. So I think Power here is an interesting case in that despite being a fiend, she's somewhat tame. I mean, obviously she's still out there, you know, even more so than Denji if that is possible. But at the same time, you know, she doesn't wantonly slaughter people or cause inordinate trouble. I mean, she definitely does cause trouble, but not so much that she's not worth it to public safety. You know, considering that we already kind of know Power is effectively a loose cannon, and that Denji at this point is unproven, but probably not much better, I feel like Makima's decision to pair them up is a little questionable. You know, surely they won't cause trouble. Man, Denji's saying some real stuff right now, you know. I can put up with her regardless of how crazy she is because she's hot. It's like, man, dude. So, to elaborate a little bit more on what I was saying about it being a bad idea to pair these two up, you know, Denji is effectively new to the job, but compared to Power, he's the more responsible one. So I feel like, if nothing else, there should be a third person to sort of wrangle these two. But Aki is nowhere to be found, you know, presumably he's doing something else. This has got to be like a managerial oversight or something. So, I mean, if there's something to be said for Power, it's that she sort of knows what side she's on. And, you know, if there's a devil around that needs slaughtering, she's more than happy to do it. You know, in this case, it's the sea cucumber devil, which I can't imagine is particularly fearsome, so, you know, she's only going to get so much enjoyment out of it, but it's certainly better than nothing, I'd imagine. Yeah, better she kills devils than people with that sort of enthusiasm. Gotta feel a little sorry for Denji, though. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.